Hey everyone, Michelle Seidling here with another episode of Food Experience Unplugged. Today we'll explore how workplace wellness programs can balance the needs of employees and the organization to create a thriving program focused on holistic health. Here to help us do that is Jon Robison, co-founder at Salveopartners. This podcast is available on multiple platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and others, as well as our website at foodexperienceunplugged.com. Please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for new content as it becomes available. Please also check out our website at foodexperienceunplugged.com for some free resources as you begin your health journey. Jon Robison, welcome to Food Experience Unplugged.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Well, happy to have you here. So excited to talk about workplace wellness. But first, will you give us a little introduction of yourself and what brought you to this point in your life and in your career, and why health promotion?
I did my undergraduate work in 1969. I went to the University of Michigan. Born and raised in New York. Went to the University of Michigan. And I didn't really want to go to college, but being the son of Jewish parents, I was expected to go and become a doctor, as was my son. It's funny, turns out both of us ended up being doctors. My son's a veterinarian. My brother. So 1969 was 69, 70, 71 was very interesting years to be in college, especially in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which was one of the hotbeds of political dissent in those days, Vietnam War and so forth, and I was right in the middle of it. I actually got my undergraduate degree is actually in music literature, because what I really wanted to do was go play music for a living. That's what I did all during junior high school and high school. And when I graduated, I went on the road for 15 years playing with guys that I actually still play with. It was almost 50 years ago. Traveled on the road for 15 years and very unhealthy lifestyle, 6 nights a week in a bar. And in those days, they were smoky. You could smoke in them, and everybody did. I was very unathletic in high school, but I got on the road and just sort of wanted to, do something to keep my health up, given the lifestyle I was living. So I got into running. And did that for many, many years. And eventually I got really interested in exercise, which I hadn't been, like I said, in high school and junior high school at all. I got picked last for all the teams. I was a pretty good runner. Then I got into triathlons. And then I thought, well, geez, maybe when I got off the road, I'll go back. I'll go get some degrees in some of these things and help people with their health. So we got off the road. We were still playing. And then back around 1986, I think it was, I settled down near East Lansing, Michigan, and went to Michigan State University, where I spent a lot of years in college. I got a master's degree in human nutrition, master's degree in exercise physiology, and a PhD in health education and human performance, which now they probably call kinesiology. And then I just really got into all of that, and I decided to teach there. I taught for 25 years. Taught in the exercise department, the nutrition department, the physiology department. It was really cool because I taught all of my own classes, which was nice, from books and my own work. So I never had to teach anything I didn't believe in. Taught a class for 20 years called Dying to Be Thin, which was basically about health at every size.
Okay.
So that's how I sort of got into health promotion. And then, I really love being on stage, which is what I did for my life, playing music. So I started on the speaking circuit, and that's what I did for many, many years. Spoke at every imaginable health promotion, nutrition conference in North America and elsewhere. And so that's, and then, a couple of things. I became involved in the Health at Every Size movement, actually before there was even a Health at Every Size movement before that. And the reason for that was when I was working on my PhD, I started a center, preventive medicine center, with a physician friend of mine called the Michigan Center for Preventive Medicine. And we got all kinds of referrals from insurance companies and stuff like that. And one of the things that we did was we had an OptiFast program. our own Optifast program. If you remember that, that's the one that Oprah did.
Okay.
Are you familiar with those programs?
Some of them.
They're basically protein sparing modified fast. So what you do is very, very large people, they're not allowed to eat any food at all. You give them 3 or 4 milkshakes a day, 700, 900 calories, and they lose tons of weight, obviously, because they're starving, right? Mm-hmm. And we had exercise physiologists, nutritionists, psychologists, social workers, everything. We met with them over time, everything. This was a big deal. Actually, these programs are still out there. And the people lost tremendous amounts of weight. These are big people, tremendous amounts of weight. And of course, 6 months later, I'd be walking down the street and I would see them and they would cross across to the other side of the street because they gained all their weight back. And they felt ashamed when I was the one who should have been ashamed. Thank God I met my wife there and she said, "What the hell are you doing? What are you doing?" Got very lucky to meet some really good people who knew better than I did at that time. I swore I would never do that again. And then, I'd been passionately involved with Health at Every Size for the last 20 plus years. Actually, before it was Health at Every Size, the organization used to be called the Association for the Health Enrichment of Large People, AHELP, it was called. And I got involved with all the original people. And then when it switched to Health at Every Size, we did that. And so I'm very involved with that. And also with the speaking around health, and always been very interested in social determinants of health and social justice. And then, I was, 60-ish. And I met my partner, Rosie, and she said, actually, my first book, which was The Spirit and Science of Holistic Health, I met her. I came in and talked for her for a presentation. And we got to know each other and just think exactly the same about just about everything. And I asked her if she'd help me rewrite a new version of the book. And she said yes. And we started doing that. We thought, this isn't what we want to do. And so we decided instead to write our first book, which was How to Build a Thriving Culture at Work. And so then she was really, really, her PhD's in management. So she was really into the whole corporate thing. And I had done some corporate stuff before that. But then we really transitioned into doing that and wrote the book, was very successful, and people wanted a training. And so we started doing online training. And then our new book just came out in March called Rehumanizing the Workplace. And it's just sort of a summary of all the companies we've worked with and what's happened and what hasn't happened, what's worked and what hasn't worked. So that brings us up to today.
That is amazing. I love just the transition and the learning process that you went through as you learned, as you met different colleagues, and really just progressed through to your version of health promotion today. That's fantastic.
Well, and I guess I would add, it's important to add because we talked about this before, but I've also experienced health from some perspectives that most people have not. One is, my experience with MS and being disabled. The other one is that 6 years ago, my wife who's a trauma specialist, she's a psychologist, was a horrific car accident, one that she was not supposed to survive from. In fact, I talked to the doctors after they came out of her first surgery, and they said she's got a 30% chance to live.
Wow. I'm so sorry that happened to her.
The good news is she's stubborn. She's stubborn. That she has really recovered. Nobody thought she'd ever work again, except me. And I wasn't sure 3 weeks in a coma. I wasn't sure until she was out of the coma. But she broke 24 bones, had brain injury, lacerated liver, lungs were detached. She got hit at 60 miles an hour, direct hit, T-bone,
wow.
by a 4,000-pound car. And playing tennis, she's riding bikes, she's kayaking, and she just restarted her practice.
Wow.
Just in January. In fact, she's in the other room, doing virtual therapy right now. So I've got perspectives on health. We've also raised a Black adopted son, which has given me lots of other perspectives on what's going on in our country right now, and what's going on in our country and so forth. So yeah, I've had a lot of experiences, varied experiences in 69 years. My partner, by the way, is she's young enough to be my daughter, which is really interesting. I never thought I'd be writing a second book at 65 years old, but she's brilliant and just a delight to work with.
That's fantastic. So now your main focus, or one of your main focuses, is on workplace wellness. Now you've done a lot with your work, and why is it that most workplace programs don't work? What is your area on that?
Well, let's just for the sake of time, let's just talk about the last 10 years, right? Because when I've been involved longer than that, but in 2010, the Affordable Care Act passed, right? And in the Affordable Care Act was the Safeway Amendment, right? And the Safeway Amendment was what caused this explosion in workplace wellness companies. Thousands of companies grew up. And the reason was, the Safeway Amendment was the CEO of the Safeway supermarket chain said that what they had done is they had used their insurance premiums to motivate their employees to participate in their programs. So if people didn't participate in their programs, they charged them more for their health insurance. Mm-hmm. They made this claim in the and this amendment was written into the Affordable Care Act. They made this claim that they saved a whole bunch of money on healthcare costs. And it was amazing. I remember this so well. Both sides of the aisle in Congress jumped on board. When was the last time that happened? President Obama was all for it. Unfortunately, what people didn't do was actually read the data, which showed that the savings for Safeway happened before the program was implemented, had nothing whatsoever to do with the program. Had to do with some benefits changes and so on and so forth, but had nothing to do with the program. And in fact, if you look at the research on using differential insurance premiums to either save money on healthcare costs, improve employee well-being, there isn't any research that shows that, none whatsoever. And in the last 10 years, there has not been a single study that has shown that. There is no research to support whatsoever that these programs can lower healthcare costs. The only way, we know how to lower healthcare costs for companies, but the only way to do that is to directly attack healthcare costs. And that has nothing to do with wellness programs, because the reason that healthcare costs are so high doesn't have anything to do with that people aren't exercising enough or they're not eating enough fruits and vegetables. It's a system that's set up with incentives that drive the wrong behaviors, right? Physicians are devised to do more stuff instead of to do the right stuff. So it turns out that in the last 10 years, and then again, over and above that is the whole idea that incentivizing people, and these are big incentives, right? If you get charged, if you look at, most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 40% of Americans can't deal with a $500 emergency without going out and borrowing money. Asking people to pay $1,000 or $2,000 more on your health insurance that's a big deal if you don't participate in their program. And the truth of the matter is, and this is something I've been interested in long before I was in the workplace, is our whole culture is sort of based on a Skinnerian behavior modification sort of approach, right? Which is taken from B.F. Skinner's work in the 50s, which was all done with animals, right? So if you take a mouse and you put him in front of a maze and you put a piece of cheese at the end of the maze, the mouse will go through the maze and find the cheese every time. You take the cheese away, the mouse stops going. It might go once or twice, but after that, it's not going to go anymore. And the idea that human beings are motivated by extrinsically, right, by reward punishments, there just isn't any research to support that. Human beings are much more complex than that. And the real motivation for people who are really motivated will tell you they're motivated from inside out, not from outside in. Mm. I've done so many presentations on this, and people raise their hand and say, well, why don't it looks like these incentives would work. People will join the programs, they'll do better behaviors. How come they don't work? And my response in a room of 300 or 400 people is to say, please raise your hand if you like to be told what to do. Mm-hmm. Nobody raises their hand. And what happens when people tell you to do something you don't want to do? And people will raise their hand and say, I ignore them. I give them the finger. I do the opposite. I said, that's why these programs don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So if we really want to, I sent you the pyramid. We have this pyramid, the Thriving Workplace Pyramid. And wellness, it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy pyramid. You're familiar with, you got self-actualization on the top and then everything else is that. It's sort of like that. Well-being programs are on the top of the pyramid. But the truth of the matter is that employee well-being starts at the bottom of the pyramid. It starts with culture. It starts with leadership. It starts with physical and especially psychological safety. People have to feel that their work is valued and that their company will recognize and celebrate their strengths and understand and them with their weaknesses. And Bob Chapman from Barry Waymuller, who's one of the people that we follow, he says that 70 to 80% of people who go to work every day go someplace where they don't think they're cared about at all.
Mm.
Putting in a foosball machine or giving people Fitbits doesn't solve that problem. Right? If people are feeling cared for and feeling they have purposeful and meaningful work and they have input and it's transparent and everything else, then yeah, Fitbit is nice, or paying for half a gym membership is nice. But if they don't feel those things, people aren't stupid.
Mm.
It's one of the reasons why so many wellness programs aren't well attended, which is why they started with the incentives in the first place. Because they figure, well, we'll fire people in.
Yeah.
Somebody, I'm gonna kill your firstborn if you don't fill in the blank. You're probably going to do it. You're not going to want to do it.
Mm-hmm. So it's more kind of rebuilding or making adjustments from the ground up instead of just implementing a wellness program that may or may not be successful.
Yeah, very similar to Maslow's hierarchy. In psychology, you're not going to reach that top level if you don't have any food, and you don't have any housing, and you don't have any. So that's what we do. We teach, and we base all of the recommendations, because we don't just tear things down. We have solutions to them, which is in both of our books. Right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And what we say to people is, we're very science oriented. So we talk a lot about in the book, in the beginning of the first book especially, and I did in my earlier book, to talk about the new sciences as opposed to the old sciences. The old sciences being this sort of 17th century approach to human beings are machines or rodents, and we treat them that way. The new sciences are quantum physics and chaos theory and psychoneuroimmunology, and especially the latest brain research of the last 20 or 25 years. And so we base all of the things we do on those sciences instead of the sort of old mechanistic kind of a science. I give you just one example. If you think about organizational charts for a company, what do they usually look like? You got little boxes like this, and then there's another level with fewer boxes, and then there's another level, and then there's one with the CEO on top, right? That's not the way human beings communicate. That's not the way things get done. The real I do this in my presentations. The real way that happens is you have a network, and they're all kind of interconnected all over the place. That's the way an organizational chart should look. And some companies actually have organizational charts that look like that. One is a machine, the other is a living system, right? And human beings and organizations are complex living systems. They're not machines. And of course, all through, go back to the early 20th century, Taylorism, scientific management, you see the pictures there of the men working on the machines, or the women later. They look like they're an extension of the machine. Everybody does exactly the same thing. They don't have any say over what they do. They certainly don't have any say over the machines or anything else. They're just plugged in, kind of, right? And that just doesn't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, with millennials, who are now I think they're probably more than 50% of the workforce now. That absolutely doesn't work for them. They want their work to have meaning and purpose. They want to be valued for what they do and acknowledged for what they do.
Mm.
Real well, because we have a millennial son. And I see it all the time in his work. He got a new job, and he was at it for like 6 months. I said, "How's it going, Josh?" He said, "It's really good. It's really good, Dad, but I haven't gotten a promotion yet." I said, "Dude, you haven't even been there 6 months. right? So they want to be, everybody wants to be treated well at work.
Mm-hmm.
But baby boomers like me, like my dad, even if they weren't treated so well, they sort of hung around and put up with it to put bread on the table. That's not the case anymore.
Mm-hmm.
These millennials, Gen X, they'll leave. They go someplace else. So that gets off a little bit off the workplace wellness thing, but yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, most organizations are existing. If you've got a new organization, you can kind of build that pyramid. But for those existing organizations, how do you make those adjustments into that pyramid that you're referring to?
Yeah, and we do that all the time. And what you do is you start. Well, sometimes you start with the CEO in the head, but you don't have to. In our latest book, we talk about companies where we've actually started with a department. One department brought us in to work on, looking at the company's why. What's their purpose? What is it that they're doing? How are they doing it? How are they treating each other? How do people feel about the culture? How do people feel if they're listened to, if they're valued, and so on and so forth? Do lots of workshops with them. We have a Thriving Workplace Culture Survey, which measures. It's really unique, a unique tool. It measures well-being and organizational. We talk about employee well-being and organizational well-being as sort of, we call it the fusion, that they're interconnected. You can't separate one from the other. And so this tool measures both of those and the fusion of both of those. And what it does is we ask people all kinds of questions about leadership and culture and everything else. How do they feel it is right now? What's the state of the organization right now? And then ask them, where would you like to be? Right. And so there's gaps. And then we measure the gaps, and then we find what areas need the most work. And then we go into the company and we help them to shrink the gaps. And then 12 months, 18 months later, we do the survey again, and we see if the gaps have shrunk. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, they do. And there are examples of companies who are doing the kind of thing that we're doing. There's a book called The Firms of Endearment, which talks about lots of companies that you've heard about. These are companies in their field that are humanized, right? It's Southwest Airlines, Whole Foods, or at least when it wasn't owned by Amazon. I'm not sure exactly where they are now. Lots of other companies who are doing things humanizing the workplace. Barry Waymo mentioned. Bob Chapman. There's a movement called conscious capitalism, which we're very involved in. It's very apropos actually for now because politically everybody's talking about capitalism versus socialism versus fascism, communism, whatever. And that's really not the discussion we need to be having. We don't need to be a socialist state, but we need to have a capitalism that's conscious, that's interested in not just the shareholders, but all the stakeholders. Right, so the employees, the customers, the suppliers, the environment, all of that. And this conscious capitalism movement it's amazing. We're very lucky to be our new book that just came out. We were one of the first 10 founding authors for them. They just started a publishing company arm of conscious capitalism, and Rosie's very involved with there's a conscious capitalism chapter in Minneapolis actually. She's very involved in that. So. There's a lot of movement in this direction. Is it mainstream? No. Do most companies do this? No. But there are a lot of companies who are doing this now.
Yeah. Can you give us one example of a company that you've worked with that has made that shift to more of a workplace program that does work?
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, although we're not really a workplace wellness company. Right, we're a consulting company for leadership and culture, and we look at workplace well-being as being, part of people development. Mm-hmm. We see it as separate. We see it as, again, that's why the pyramid is so critically important. We see it as building it. It's a workplace wellness programs for us are the cream or the cherry on top of the ice cream, and then the cherry on top. That's what that is. Because without all the underneath stuff, there's no sense in that. Yeah, we work with, actually, Rosie just did a podcast with a chemical company, big chemical company that we worked with for the last 2 years. And that's the one where we came in, just one department. The CEO wasn't really interested, and one department that she had some connections with, and they went in and they're all over the country, 100 years old company. And remember now, so it's a chemical company, so a lot of men, and a lot of first meetings of people sitting like this, right? What the hell am I doing here? And Rosie and one of our, I wasn't involved personally in a lot of it because there's so much travel involved. But Rosie and one of our other folks went there and worked with the department. Did the survey, improved the culture, saw the culture improving, and sooner or later, other departments started asking her, "What the hell's going on over there?" Right? And eventually, the CEO found out about it, and he said, "Wait a minute, we got to do this for the whole company. Can't do this for one." So for the last 2 years, we've been doing that. And all kinds of amazing things have happened, in terms of the culture and shrinking those gaps.
Mm.
A lot of times we're called in to fix a wellness program, but that's not what we end up doing very, very rarely, actually anymore. Because once the culture once the culture is changed, and once the leadership becomes servant leadership rather than top-down sort of autocratic, do what I tell you leadership, it just sort of falls into place.
Okay, that's fantastic. Because then you don't necessarily need to push wellness on people. It kind of comes naturally, perhaps.
Yeah, and when we started, wellness and well-being, right? So most people in the wellness industry now are not using that word anymore. They're using the word well-being, and the reason for that, it's kind of an iffy thing. I remember when Rosie and I first got together and we decided we would be using well-being instead of wellness. If you look up the definition of wellness and you look up the definition of well-being, they're all close, really close. They're holistic, right? They both talk about physical and social and, financial, and they both do that. But after the Affordable Care Act happened and the Safeway Amendment and all these wellness companies just exploded. It was just an explosion, Wild West, it's been described as. And, most wellness programs have been very physically focused, right? It's either your exercise or your nutrition. Occasionally they'll throw a stress management program in, or maybe a resilience, more resilience now. But 10 years ago, it was just basically, exercise and nutrition, take care of your body. And so when we moved to well-being, it was supposedly because we were expanding that to be a lot of other, to be social and to be relationships and to be physical and psychological safety at work and so on and so forth. The reality is the damn terms mean the same thing. And really, as I've argued on LinkedIn with many people, the term health actually would work just fine as well. Because if you look at the innovation of the term health, before the scientific revolution, right? If you look at indigenous cultures and their idea of health, it's very holistic, right? If you think of the Native Americans, when they went out to hunt the buffalo, first they prayed to the buffalo, then they went out and they killed the buffalo, then they came back and they used every bit of the buffalo, and then they prayed to the buffalo again, thanking the buffalo for providing, which is very different from what European settlers did when they came over here, which was just kill the buffalo for the hell of it, right? Health is actually a very holistic term, but the problem is every time it's gotten into the workplace and even other places, it's become so narrowly defined as physical. So that's why we moved to well-being. But the truth of the matter is, it doesn't really matter what you call it. It matters what you do with it.
Yeah. So where does food and holistic health come into this picture of the whole pyramid?
Well, it's interesting because that's sort of, I see there's sort of two separate but connected ideas, right? Just been talking about the last 10 years, but holistic health obviously has been around for a lot longer than that. It was very big in the 70s and 80s and 90s in this country. And holistic health, they did, holistic health, if you look at the books of those eras, they did talk about things other than just exercise and nutrition, right? Of spirituality, and they talked about, and I did when I was presenting back in those days. The problem was, and still is, that most people in the health professions believe that the primary determinant of your health are your individual health behaviors. And that's not true. It's simply not true, right? If you look at health disparities, let's just use our country for now. If you look at health disparities across our country, individual health behaviors contribute about 25 or 30%. That's it. You got another 10% from medical, another 10% from genes, a little bit less. But the vast majority of the disparities in health in this country have to do with the social determinants of health. In terms of holistic, without that piece, it's not really holistic. Without that piece, it's all about personal responsibility. And, I talk about, the term personal responsibility. Responsibility means the ability to respond. And if you live in substandard housing, if you live in a non-safe neighborhood, if there are no healthy food around, if you can't go out and run at night because you could get killed, if you don't have health care, all of those things, your ability to respond is minimized. And that's so much more. That's where the disparities in health largely come from. So that's the holistic piece. The food piece is, that we have basically, a disordered eating approach to food, right? Now that's different from eating disorders, right? Although we have plenty of those, especially now binge eating disorder, which isn't surprising. But, the whole focus on food has been overtaken in the last 50, 60 years by a focus on weight. And we have a culture that is obsessed with thinness, particularly for women. And it has had and continues to have devastating effects on our health.
So how can organizations who want to create this thriving culture, this pyramid, where do they start? How do they put those pieces together so that it benefits both the organization and the employees, and they can thrive and have these different pieces working in their favor?
Well, again, if we're talking from a nutrition and weight standpoint, because of course weight loss programs are one of the most common interventions in workplace wellness. I don't know. I haven't looked at the data in the last year. I don't know if they're the most common, but they're certainly one of the most common. And of course, when it comes to food and weight, that's what we're doing. We're doing with our training. We train. We have a program called Health for Everybody, which was created by a colleague of mine decades ago at a workplace wellness program that we put together. We've run this program all over the country, from one coast to the other coast. And now we're training other people to run that. So that's what we did with Beaumont Health. And we've got a training going right now where we have some dietitians, some exercise people, some HR people, different kinds of people who are being trained so that they can go in and run this program instead of a weight loss program. Or at some companies, they do both, which is fine. People get to make their choice.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
From that standpoint, and then the other piece of this is that the idea from a food perspective, right? We're very keen health at every size, folks, and other people as well. It's interesting because when I first started doing this after the Optifast nightmare, I could count the people on my hands and feet who were doing this all over the country, and I met most of them because I felt so guilty, I felt so bad, so shamed for hurting people so much. But now there are thousands of people doing this. So it's not mainstream, but there are thousands of people who are doing this. And so we're training people to do that. And the other piece of this is the food piece, which is that we believe the ability to eat well, to take care of yourself and eat well, comes from inside, not from outside. That's why if you're around a bunch of 5 or 6 year olds before the parents screw them up, they don't overeat, they don't undereat, they eat what they want, and then they don't eat, even babies. You might be familiar with the work of Ellen Satter. I think she, in my opinion, I've done some work with her before. I've known her for a long time. She's a leading authority on this. And she says, babies are born knowing how to do that. And we unteach it. I tell the story about, actually I told this to the Beaumont people. Our son went to Montessori school. You familiar with them?
Yes.
Unbelievable schools. Amazing. Talk about treating people like humans, even children. Unfortunately, the head person there, I forget what they call him. They don't call him a principal, but she had an eating disorder. So everything was done. I mean, I loved the school, but my son would come home and he would say, they won't let me have another carbohydrate until I finish my protein. And I said, wait, what the hell are they doing talking about protein and carbohydrate at your age, first of all? And second of all, who are they to tell you what you can eat and what you can't eat? So I went in and I went and talked to the woman. She knew I was a nutrition professional. And I went and I tried to explain to her that that's not the right way to bring up children around food. And I said to her, I will come in and I'll do a half day or a whole day training for all of your faculty, and I'll do it for nothing. And she knew that I taught at MSU in the nutrition department and so on. Wouldn't let me do it. Wouldn't let me do it because of her eating disorder. So I said to her, and I went to my son's teacher too, and I said, under no circumstances is anybody here ever to say anything to our son about what he can and cannot eat. I don't want to hear about protein and carbohydrate. If he wants to eat nothing but protein on Tuesday, then he can eat but protein on Tuesday. So that was really powerful, because that school, if you know about that school, it's based on really, it's very humanistic. I mean, they teach, there's a lot of compassion, a lot of acknowledgments of strengths and weaknesses and help and everything else. But the food thing that was rough.
Yeah.
So consequently, he's a great eater.
That's great.
He eats all kinds of food. If he wants to eat junk food, which I don't believe in that anyway, he does. But he's very got a really, really good approach to food.
That's fantastic.
They had messed with him.
Yeah. So, Jon, how can people get in contact with you for more information, with your books, with your work?
Probably the best place is email, which is just Jon, Jon, and then the company is Salveopartners, SALVEO partners.com. Our website is salveopartners.com, and there's all kinds of stuff on there. We have white papers and blogs and lots of free stuff to learn about what we do, and just to provide information for people who are looking to rehumanize their workplace.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That is fantastic. Well, Jon, it's been a pleasure, and it's really been eye-opening to see what things organizations and employees can do that will work, and that how they can both thrive together. And that is fantastic. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all your work with holistic health and everything that you're doing. So thank you, Jon. It's been a pleasure having you here on the show today.
Thank you, Michelle. It was fun. It was fun talking.